Welcome to the Darkstream, Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com, and unauthorized.tv. Today I'm going to talk about something that I call demoralization season. And what that is what the media is attempting to do to supporters of President Donald Trump. It's something that they've commonly done for decades, but it appears to be getting more and more out of hand, as you'll see in a moment. And what I'm referring to, of course, is the way in which the media overreports the polling results of its favored candidate and reports that fewer people than actually support the disfavored candidate exist. And apparently the idea is that people are more interested in being a part of the winning side, or alternatively that if they think that their candidate doesn't have a chance, that they won't bother turning up to vote. I'm not entirely sure what the exact reasoning behind doing this is, because it doesn't really appear to be all that effective. It's a well-known historical fact that the polls habitually overreport the preferences for the Democratic candidate. So much so that to get a true picture of the situation, you often need to subtract 5 points from the subtract 2.5 from the Democratic candidate and give 2.5 to the Republican candidate, just to get a better idea of what's actually happening. But the trick is knowing when to apply it, because another factor that we see is the way that they exaggerate the polls at a particular time, which is the period that we're now entering. That's why I call it the demoralization season. And then as the final stretch of the election appears, they begin to dial back their exaggeration in order to maintain at least some modest degree of credibility for the next time around. Now, the interesting thing is how people continue to take the polls seriously. And I'm not talking about reporters and journalists. I'm not talking about corrupt people who are going to push their favorite candidate regardless. I'm talking about the everyday voter. When you hear them talk about the election, you'll hear staunch Trump supporters say, well, I'm worried that he's so far behind Biden. Or you'll see Democratic supporters, people that are supporters of Joe Biden, saying things like, well, I'm just nervous that we're going to get overconfident. Well, why wouldn't you be overconfident when your candidate is 18 points ahead? 18 points ahead is a sure thing. And the reason, of course, is that even the staunch Biden supporters don't believe the polls, which is why you shouldn't either. And here's why you shouldn't. Let's take a look at this particular survey right now. This is one of the latest, I think it's from yesterday, the Real Clear Politics poll average. Now, if you notice, Biden has been solidly in the lead throughout, according to the average of the polls. The poll average is now getting to the point where we're looking at a double-digit lead, and that's the average. So some of the outliers we're seeing now are showing that Biden has a lead of as much as 16%. If that's true, it's over. And yet, look at what they were reporting last time around. This is the same time frame, and I isolated it so we can see a little bit more clearly exactly what the difference is. So they were showing that Hillary was ahead, although in this case they were showing that she was ahead by an average of 3.2% over that period. If we go back to Biden, it's showing that he's ahead by an average of 9 point, or no, that's not the average, that's the current one. They're showing that he was ahead by, or is ahead by 9.6%. Now, obviously that didn't work out so well for Hillary. And you can say, well, but I'm worried. I'm worried because 24 days before the election, Biden's up 9.6%, whereas 24 days before the election, Hillary Clinton is up 5.3%. Well, the reason that you don't need to worry too much about that, or you shouldn't worry too much about that, is because the media is simply doubling down. By exaggerating Hillary Clinton's lead wasn't enough. So utilizing the binary thinking of the media, they think, well, obviously we just didn't exaggerate her lead enough. And so they're attempting to exaggerate Joe Biden's lead even more. Now let's have a look at the 538 polls. 538 is Nate Silver, New York Times, etc., etc. I think he might be off on his own now, but anyhow, doesn't matter. The point is that he is supposedly the best pollster out there. And he's saying that Joe Biden has an 86% chance of winning. This is the Electoral College vote. He actually says that Biden has a 94% chance of winning the popular vote. And if you see the numbers there, you can see that this is supposedly the biggest lead that Biden has had throughout the whole process. You know, Biden is pulling away. You're seeing people like Andrew Sullivan fantasizing about not just a Biden victory, but a Biden landslide. But here's the thing. Notice that 86%. Remember that number. And this is as of today, August 10th or August 11th or October 11th. So let's look at what we see here on 538's prediction on October 12th, 2016. Real Clear Politics projected that Clinton had an even bigger lead over Trump than Biden does. 86.9%. You know, basically 87 to 13 versus 86 to 14. So what this tells us is that there's no reason to be particularly worked up about Biden's supposed lead. Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton with a, not, I wouldn't say easily, but he beat her fairly soundly. It wasn't like Bush Gore. I correctly called it, long before the networks did, because it was very obvious as soon as the final numbers for Broward County started to come in. Actually, it was clear that once the final numbers for Broward County, that there weren't enough outstanding votes to make up for the gap. It was very clear that Trump had won Florida and therefore won the election. And so what we're seeing now is exactly the same sort of exaggeration, exactly the same attempt to demoralize Trump voters that we saw back in 2016. It didn't work then. It's definitely not going to work now. Why not? Because if you look at the other indicators, the non-poll indicators, if you look at the stock market, if you look at the are you better off than you were 4 years ago, etc., that number is, now granted, it's still a poll. You can't take it very seriously, except for the fact that it reports the exact opposite of what the media wants it to report. The number reported there is 56% of people said that they're better off than they were 4 years ago. Compare that to either Reagan or Barack Obama, both of whom won re-election. Their numbers were in the 40s. Other factors, other keys to the election that various political observers have been maintaining over the years, everything from the Red Wing cookie poll to that political analyst who successfully called all the presidential elections for the past 11 or 12 presidential cycles. Every single one of those non-media, non-poll related observers predicts a Trump victory, predicts a bigger Trump victory than he had in 2016. And there's even even the polls, manipulated and corrupt as they are, they still have enough connection to reality that you can see cracks in their demoralization model. So if you look at, this was this wasn't what I meant to show up. This was the final prediction. So notice that they backed it down from 87% down to 71%. Same thing's going to happen with Biden. You're going to see his quote unquote lead over Trump decline. I would predict that it's going to end up around 75% because, again, they are doubling down on their exaggerations, and so they're going to probably give Biden a better chance of winning than they did Hillary. Now here's the evidence that I wanted to point out. Even where these polls are manipulated and corrupt, it's a little bit more difficult for them to do that with the state polls. They don't have the same level of commitment from the media involved there. And it's also a little bit more difficult to lie about smaller numbers of people. People notice it more often. It's very difficult to say Joe Biden has a 80% lead in a community where you can literally look outside your window and see lots of Trump signs and no Biden signs. And so now they still do exaggerate. I'm not saying that those polls are particularly accurate. I'm saying that they are less inaccurate than the national polls. And if you look at the 25 days to election, you can see that Biden's supposed lead, his average supposed lead at 4.6% in the battleground states, which are the only states that actually matter in the election, is smaller than Hillary Clinton's lead at the same time. So this again indicates that Biden is going to lose to Trump, and he's going to lose to Trump worse than Hillary Clinton did. I've been saying that there'd be a Trump slide since the day after the 2016 election. I see absolutely no reason to modify that prediction. It's not going to be a popular vote landslide, but it is going to be something that looks like a landslide in the Electoral College, in my opinion. Now, you can point to my failure to correctly predict that the Republicans were going to hold on to the House in 2018. But remember, the polls were vastly exaggerated there too. There was supposed to be this big blue wave with a historic number of Democratic congressmen coming into the House. The Democrats were supposed to reclaim the Senate and so forth. What actually happened? They had a solid midterm election. The minority party usually does very well in the midterm election in the House, and they did. I think they picked up something like 39 seats, which was, or 41 seats, which is pretty average for a midterm election. But not only did they not take the Senate, Democrats actually lost 2 seats in the Senate. And so, although my prediction was a bit too much of an outlier there, it was correct in that the polls were significantly exaggerating the Democratic performance. They're doing the same thing here, and there's just too many non-poll indicators, as well as the battleground polls, which are showing that Biden is underperforming Hillary, to think that anything is going to happen but the re-election of President Donald Trump. So this was the swing state again, and so I think you can go into the next 3.5 weeks here with every confidence that what we're going to see is a Trump slide 2020. I'm Voxday. This is the Darkstream.